What is up, everybody? Brett here, back with Good Talk Gaming, my YouTube channel. We're going to be doing some free-for-alls today in Total War Warhammer 2 on the Lost Temple. I'm going to be playing as Norska. This is game 2 in the 4-part mini-series, I guess you could call it, that I'm doing with these excellent and very friendly players that I met just yesterday. So I'm going to go ahead and put it on slow-mo here. Things get started right away. Like I said, I did pick Norska. I wanted to do a very fun build with a double mammoth. I took the Soul Crusher. So the Soul Crusher is the Regiment of Renown War Mammoth. Huge stats, but more importantly, he does have a mechanic that gives him 44% physical resistance. So when he starts getting focused down, other mammoths just die. But the Soul Crusher, you pop that, and you can keep him alive through a lot of the burst damage that your opponents are going to want to put on him. My front line is a mix of Marauders with Marauder Spearmen on the flanks. I brought 4 Marauder Hunters with Javelins, very cost effective, armor piercing. They don't have very good range, but if they are engaged upon in melee, they can hold their own, which is a nice little perk. And their missile fire is very direct and very accurate, and with that AP they're able to take down large targets quite effectively. I took 1 Skinwolf Werekin as my kind of backup hero option, in addition to a nice little squad for him to roll with some armored Werekins, a unit you don't get to see very often nowadays in the meta, but they were very strong upon release. They have physical resistance, in addition to having higher armor than the non-armored variant, Frenzy, Immunopsychology, and I did take the armor on the Werekin, so that's a nice little AoE buff that increases their armor as well as gives them some passive missile resistance. I took the Norscan Ice Wolves just to have access to Frostbite. You'll see there on their melee attack stat, that little symbol denotes that they have the ability to slow enemies once they engage in melee. So you see here I'm shifting my formation. All I could see at the start of this battle for the Beastman player was 2 units of Minotaurs facing in my direction on the very edge of the deployment zone. One of them being the Butchers of Kalkangar, the Regiment of Renown that causes terror and has passive regen, a very scary unit. And this Bray Shaman with the Lore of Wild, going to be casting quite a few Vile Tides on me this game, an explosive spell. So I had to figure, and because I'm somewhat familiar with this map, that there were going to be Vanguard deployed units right here in this forest, and I was correct. Now, what I did not assume at the very beginning was that there would be this many units Vanguard deployed behind me. Once I was able to see how many units were in front of me, I somewhat discounted how many units would be behind me. So 2 units of Centaurs with great weapons, as well as a poisoned Warhound unit, which is a nice little goon squad themselves. So very, very equipped to deal with what I have here protecting my javelins. Now, our opponent here, the Beastman player Richie, he brought a front line of Gore Herds with shields. I like that choice. They hit hard, very decent weapon strength. Shields if I was going to be trying to focus them down with the javelins, let's say. And very good on the charge. Excellent charge bonus for an infantry unit. A couple Ungors here just to provide some just some higher model count density to the front line. More chaff units for me to get through. If I had gone very small in the front line with, let's say, some Marauder champions, very expensive, they would be able to hold them down long enough. And once again, the general idea is that all these units are able to Vanguard deploy. Kazrak One Eye is his lord. He brought him on the Razor Gore chariot. He does have his armor, and Deadly Onslaught gives him armor piercing. The armor affects casters, and I did not opt to get a caster this game. I was short on gold and trying to make this build work, and I would say 9 times out of 10 you need to bring a caster. In any build that you do, you need to figure it out. You need to get a caster in there. But it ended up not being necessary this game. I was very focused in this build, and it ends up paying off for me. Also has 2 units of Ungor Raiders, which is a nice choice. It's going to help him poke down my mammoths. So before this gets way too crazy, quickly go into the Tombkin's army. And I kind of liked it. It was unique. It was just a ton of skeleton warriors, just a ton. And when these guys start dying, they're going to trigger his Realm of Souls. They're all going to get healing. Setzer the Imperishable up on his Kimrian War Sphinx, and I've talked about him at length in other videos. but he did take quite a few spells, as well as his unique sword, the Sword of Petra, and that lowers, it does like a blind effect, lowers melee attack, melee defense, and accuracy. So he's going to be a heck of a duelist and an anti-infantry killer. He brought 1 Necropolis Knights with halberds, very expensive anti-cav, anti-large units. They apply poison, great armor piercing, and very fast. He brought 1 Hyro Titan, possibly looking to increase his Winds of Magic for Cetrus casting, as well as 1 Bone Giant. One of my favorite units on the Tomb King's roster. Let's see here. He has 350 range, does magic damage, and yeah, his is 1 singular artillery piece that he is going to be able to keep back and do a lot of damage with, especially against large targets. They're very accurate in that way. Now, luckily for me, the greenskin player, he decided to engage on the Tomb Kings in such a way with his artillery here, the Doom Diver catapults, which for those of you who don't know, they shoot little goblins with wings and they kamikaze themselves into your front lines. But by engaging on the Tomb Kings player, he forced him away from me, and that allowed me to really focus on my engagement here with the Beastman player. So my mammoths are getting into the front line. My front line has engaged, and very briefly, the greenskin player went with Skarsnik. A very unusual choice, and we're going to see how that works out for him, as well as an all-goblin army, backline of Night Goblin archers, including the Rusty Heirs, as well as a nice little front line that's going to just chew up the skeleton warriors here. The Durkit Squid Hoppers, a little bit of a tongue twister. They do have innate missile resistance that the other Squig Hoppers do not have, and just a ton of goblins chevroned up. Bit of a goon squad here with the goblin big bosses, but we'll let them fight it out, and we'll get here, and I'll take this out of slow-mo. Nice Sea Fang here. I think this is my first one, and it's going to go into these very lightly armored doors, and it's going to take out 2 units all by itself. I've positioned my protective backline units here to either get into the raiders, but when I saw that the Butchers of Kalkengard were going to charge, you'll see here that I'm going to quickly envelop them. This is an excellent fight for me, and it's one that I want to take. Now, this is where my attention to the front line really cost me. The Centaurs with great weapons are able to run straight into my javelins, and they're going to do a lot of damage. They take out a lot of models, but the javelins, one thing they are is resilient compared to most skirmishers. The ones that don't get hit by the initial charge, I'm going to turn them and start picking them apart. The Centaurs with great weapons are very lightly armored. They have no shields, so they're going to take the full force of these javelins. So as they start to rally and shoot, they're going to start protecting themselves, and that was something I really should have been looking out for much better. I get Wulfric here into the back line and these raiders. I was taking a lot of missile damage, little by little, kind of a death by 1,000 cuts type of damage on the Soul Crusher. And at some point here, he gets surrounded by Minotaurs, which have excellent armor-piercing values. Despite even being the shielded versions, they still hit quite hard against a unit like the War Mammoth. So I'm going to pop his Enrage and give him that 44% damage resistance. Now, I managed to get my Norscan Ice Wolves up into the woods. I'm going to use them to chase down routing units. Viletide going off here, damaging my Spearman units. But at this point, we've got the Butchers of Kalkengard surrounded. Their regen is helping them stay in this fight. But with the buffs from the Werekin and the Skin Wolves themselves having regen and frenzy, they're going to kill them, and we're going to drive them off the battlefield. Wulfric is going to rack up a lot of kills this game, and I had a bit of a competition going on in my head between who was going to get more kills, who's going to crush more souls, you know, the Soul Crusher or Wulfric. Another Sea Fang going off here, finishing off the last of this front line of Ungor herds and Gore herds with shields. So I've got most of my opponent's army routing here. Kazrak is in the back line on his chariot, doing great work against my Marauder Hunters. And whenever he goes on one of them, I turn the others and try to get onto them. Camera's jerking around a little bit. So you'll see here he's charging straight into my Marauder Hunters, and he's going to hurt them. But I've got my protective squad here coming to try and intercept him on the edge of the map. Together they'll definitely be able to take out Khazrak. The Werekin is a great duelist, especially against Khazrak on his chariot. Khazrak on foot, with all of his buffs, could probably take a Werekin. But on a chariot, he's made for killing infantry, and he's not going to have a good time doing that. So the rest of this is mostly some cleanup. I'm going to spare you guys watching me chase down a bunch of units, but this is something I wanted to point out before I go over to the other side. These Minotaurs, I chased them for quite a while, but they are faster than my Mammoths. I didn't want to overchase, so while I'm taking all of my opponents' units and knocking them off the battlefield, Khazrak here going down, I end up letting these Minotaurs live, and we're going to see how that comes to bite me in the butt in just a minute, in kind of hilarious fashion. So this frontline engagement here kind of got started off with a bang. The Durkis Squig Hoppers and the other Squig Hoppers charged right in, not really having anything to fear whatsoever from the Skeleton player, the Tomb King player with his mass skeleton front line. They got off a lot of damage and they retreated, allowing the Goblins just to get in there. So you'll see they have no leadership. They're all crumbling. The Ushabti were summoned in the background. Now, what happened was the Tomb King player charged in. Cetra is excellent against everything on this battlefield, but what he perhaps did not see, thanks to their stalk mechanic, was the huge backline firing line, kind of anchored by the Rusty Arrows. Now, what the Rusty Arrows do that is unique to them is that they apply armor sundering to any unit that comes into contact with their missiles. So you use that in conjunction with these poison dealing Night Goblin archers, as well as, let's say, these Goblin big bosses who did take both Slippery and I think it's called the Sword of Anti-Heroes, and what that's able to do is debuff units in an AoE around them and lock them down. So here, see here, actually the Sword of Anti-Heroes, and I was thinking of something else. So the Sword of Anti-Heroes, we can see the buff here, plus 20% armor piercing, plus 20% weapon damage. So no doubt they got that huge armor piercing and weapon damage onto Cetra and gooned him out. Now I'm reforming my lines. I'm bringing my army here to kind of take the top of this hill. The Minotaurs rally at the last second, right on the edge of the battlefield. The Bone Giant is surrounded by low-tier Goblins. These Goblins are ranked up, so a smart play from the Greenskin player, ranking up your Goblins makes a big difference. Not every unit in the game really benefits from giving them those increased chevrons, but Goblins with just a little bit more leadership and better melee stats, they stick around for a lot longer. So I get my last Sea Fang off there. I saw an opportunity to get some more points and potentially kill these low armored units that were blobbed up. The Soul Crusher is going to get in there a little bit ahead of the rest of my army, and that was somewhat of a mistake. I was looking to kind of relieve the Bone Giant, hoping he would get out and continue fighting against the Greenskin player, but that was not the case. He's going to crumble with no other units left to support him, and that's at the moment where I start to see all of these Night Goblin archers, and they really start to take a toll. One of them actually was able to fire all of its ammunition in that engagement, which is impressive. These other Night Goblins are almost out of ammo, but the Rusty Arrows and one Night Goblin archer are still sitting with quite a bit of ammunition, enough to do a lot of damage. So the frontline engagement begins. My remaining Javelins, I have them sitting back here, and I'm trying to focus down any large target that I can, like the Goblin big bosses. They're probably the most threatening thing on the battlefield, in addition to Skarsnik himself, who's using Spite of the Bad Moon, giving him missile parry and expert charge defense and a bit of an AoE, as well as Trixie Traps. The Night Goblin Shaman is using all of his abilities as well. I come in with Wolfric the Wanderer, pop, fight, or die. Soul Crusher here, I charged him in and pulled him back, and he just was a damage sponge at this point. And he's going to take it to the face, all of that missile damage. Wolfric is going to get in here and start doing what he does best. He is poisoned, he is taking debuffs, but at this point he still has almost 7,000 HP. And I'm going to say, you know what, kind of screw this fight and this front line with all these big bosses and things. And I'm going to get into this back line. Not in time to save Soul Crusher, unfortunately, but just in time to kind of save Wulfric himself. I needed to get in there just to prevent him from being the one that takes the damage. And I'm going to prioritize, of course, the Rusty Arrows. They are the most dangerous. And I'm going to try and use what remains of my javelins to take down both Skarsnik and the big bosses. So Skinwolves and Werekin do a great job of taking out Skarsnik. Skarsnik does have anti-large and poison attacks, so at a 1v1 with the Werekin, I would be very curious to know how well he could do. I think he would probably do quite well if they both start at full health. Skarsnik does have a higher HP pool than most Goblin war bosses, so he would probably put up quite a good fight. But my Werekin being in such good shape, as well as my armored Skinwolves, gives me a really powerful late game punch. That region keeping them topped off until this point in the game. And we're going to seek to chase down all of these skirmishers. We don't want anyone to rally and return. The Doom Diver Catapult managed to fire all of its ammunition this game with 185 kills. Quite good. So at this point, I still don't have it in the bag. I'm not in first place. Just now moving into first place, and these rallying Minotaurs, I saw them at the last second. And you'll see here I managed to get my Spearmen and my Marauders onto them, but they managed to get right into my Javelins. And they are going to tear them up. Only 5 models left at super low HP, and my Spearmen are going to be able to take some of them out, but not before they do irreparable damage to my back line. My Marauders completely shatter. The Spearmen are about to break. Both my Javelins break. We've got them down to 4 models. We'll kill another one soon. And man, I was just shocked. I was like, I can't believe those Minotaurs that I didn't chase off have come back to bite me. And I think we were all in chat, and people were like, dude, watch the Minotaurs. And the other guy was like, man, why didn't you tell him? Luckily for me, I saw them at the last second and was able to at least engage them on my own terms with Spearmen. Had I not been able to, they might not have suffered the 2 casualties that they did, and then ultimately broken off. So Wulfric here is kind of the big bad on the battlefield, and we are going to try to chase off as many of these routing goblins as possible. Some of them are shattered, which is fine. We don't need to chase them. A big boss just left the battlefield, which is excellent. Still having some very mobile units left on the battlefield is paying dividends right now. Managing to keep up my Norscan Ice Wolves until this point in the game. They're going to help me chase off some of these units. And the last thing I wanted was for someone like Skarsnik or a big boss to come back. So I'm chasing them off, and you'll see I have my units spread out to individually chase. And of course he had another unit of Ungors that came back just a little too late. Had he engaged them with the Minotaurs in my back line, he would have decimated them, and these Minotaurs would probably still be alive. And, you know, I don't think I would have lost from that point, but it would have been much scarier. He could have potentially ran around cleaning up my, you know, my Spearmen, my Marauders, while Wulfric and my Werekin, being the heavy hitters that are left, would have been the ones forced to continue their cleanup duty. And then we would have had a bit of a climactic battle. No doubt I would have come out ahead. But just a little bit of a side note. If you end up losing kind of in the initial points of a free-for-all, what you want to do is you want to take whatever you have left and consolidate it. Don't leave it split up all over the battlefield. Because if you wait long enough for, let's say, the 2 or 3, you know, winning factions to engage each other, they'll end up hurting each other quite a bit. And you'll be able to get in there maybe at the last second. And we ended up playing, like I said, we have 2 more games that we played from this little series, and then today, just today, before casting this, we played some more games. And we had a fun one. I don't think I'm going to cast those. There were a few slightly cheesier builds, and some people ended up leaving before the end, so I don't think I'm going to cast those. But there were some fun moments where I got crushed by Dark Elf Armor Piercing, but I managed to keep Kolek, some Gore Beast Chariots, and some the Swords of Chaos. I managed to keep them all alive until the late game and move around as kind of a really fierce charging squad. and that was fun. So you don't want to leave until it's over. The leadership in free-for-alls is somewhat buffed. Units tend to stick around and rally quite well, and that's what ends up happening a lot of the time. So don't leave just because you quote unquote lost your 1v1 in the beginning of a free-for-all, because you can still make quite the impact. It's almost like, I don't know if you guys play Magic the Gathering, but if you ever play Commander, when one person starts getting focused, sometimes alliances get made, people start agreeing to things. So, at this point, the goblins and the beastmen could have agreed to kind of role play, take on Norska, come at me together, and you miss out on lots of fun opportunities like that if you duck out early. So let's go ahead and check out the post-battle screen and see what did the most work. So Wolfric with the huge kills, a lot of that being low-tier beastmen and goblins, but man, that felt good. I was so happy I brought double war mammoths, because they just gave, even if I had gone up against the Tomb Kings, all three of these players gave me the chaff units that I would have wanted with this many mammoths. And with the upcoming update for Vampire Coast, the mammoths are getting buffed. It looks like they're increasing, perhaps not their mass, but I do recall from early Total War Warhammer 1, when the mammoths were first released, they didn't get stuck as much as they do now in infantry formations. They were able to just kind of walk freely, and as they walked, they would do damage. They would attack, and it didn't seem as if they were limited as many of the large units in this game are. Something like the Hyro Titan, for instance, when it attacks, and this is getting into very complicated kind of hidden mechanics of the game, but every unit you see thrown by a large unit's attack isn't necessarily a unit that's been damaged by it. The amount of units that can be damaged is limited, depending on that particular large target. And it seemed to me, as someone who somewhat understands the hidden mechanics of the game, that when the mammoths were first released, the number of targets that could be hit by their charges or their attacks and their AoEs was quite high, and that resulted in the appearance of a really impactful charge that would just crush infantry lines. And we were able to see that in the recent Ever-Chosen tournament. And I don't think they changed the mammoth so much as they reverted it back to its original form and its ability to attack multiple targets. So Wolfric the Wanderer and Soul Crusher doing work here. My front line held great against the Ungors. The Marauders with their Berserker style, like enrage mechanic, really paying off against them. Yeah, my Goon Squad did great. The Werekin didn't get a lot of kills, but that's because he was focusing down hero units, which is what he's meant to do. Norscan Ice Wolves and the Skin Wolves got a lot of retreating kills. This Bone Giant must have been just nailing people with 101 kills. All goblins, but probably providing great anti-skirmishing with its super long range. Cetra didn't get a lot of kills. Like I said, I figure he got focused down aggressively by the Orc player. And we can look here, and I say Orc, I meant to say Goblin, because he went the Orcs, but he took an all-Goblin army. Pretty sneaky, also going the Greenskins instead of going for Skarsnik's unique faction. And he did take units like the Warlord's Boys and the Eight-Peak Lunix. I love taking these guys as well, in addition to the Nasty Skulkers. They almost always get their value. If I had to pick an auto-gen army for, let's say, an auto-gen tournament or something like that, and I had to pick one race, it would almost always be Greenskins. Their regiments of renown are some of the most cost-effective in the game, and you'll see here he was able to take 4 of them, and they all performed. The Rusty Heirs didn't get a number of kills to reflect their input on a game, but no doubt they were responsible for a large portion of the DPS onto the large targets of the Tomb Kings player, as well as a lot of the damage that ended up ultimately taking Soul Crusher down, his last 2,000 or so HP. Kazrak was able to do some work on his chariot, but I just had too many javelins, which is something you can really never have too many of in Norska's roster. These Warhounds that got into my back line, these Centaurs that got into my back line, They all did a great job. Fortunately for me, I was able to shut down these raiders before they were able to do too much damage, as well as the butchers of Kalkengard. So that's it for me today, guys. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please go ahead and hit that thumbs up button. Man, too many tongue twisters today. Comment on the video if there was something about it you wanted to point out, something I missed, or a strategy that you think I could have employed. I'm always interested to hear other people's opinions on things like that. And subscribe if you haven't already. I'm a new channel. I really notice every subscription, and it really makes my day when I get a new subscriber. So without further ado, guys, my name has been Brett. My channel is Good Talk Gaming, and I will see you in the next one.